Have you ever noticed how the word trust means something completely different depending on who you're talking to? Because if you ask an average 20-year-old who they trust online, they're going to point to someone with a ring light and 100,000 likes or more. But if you ask a 60-year-old, they're going to mention probably a doctor, a pastor, or maybe someone who's already long gone that they built trust on, maybe where they got their daily news. The difference right there, that's what I call the trust chiasm, because here's the thing. It's not as simple as young people trust influencers and old people trust institutions or experts. The truth is that gap is actually starting to blur. Let's rewind a little bit. For anyone born after, say, the mid 80s, the internet wasn't something they discovered, it's something they inherited. So they grew up online, learning to scroll probably before they could even spell. These are the digital natives I'm talking about. They trust what they can see, what feels raw, immediate, and unscripted. They don't need credentials, they need proof in the comments. You show them 1,000 unfiltered product reviews, and they'll tell you that's data. Now let's cross the line. Let's meet what I call the traditionalists. These are people who grew up when authority came in uniforms, offices, logos. They were taught that credibility is earned with time, not clicks. So if you want their trust, you better bring a degree, a title, or a track record. So one side is saying, I trust the person who feels real. And the other side is saying, I trust the person who is qualified. And both sides think the other one is being naive. Now, watch what happens though when these two worlds collide. So, let's take the pandemic, for example. Younger people were scrolling TikTok for home remedies, stats, and viral breakdowns of CDC reports. Older generations were glued to the television on all the press conferences and they were waiting for the experts to speak. But somewhere in between, the lines started to blur. Grandparents joined Facebook to keep up with the kids. Then they started sharing health tips, home remedies, recipes, even breaking news from pages they didn't realize weren't even vetted. And suddenly, the traditionalists, the ones who once scoffed at online opinions, were forwarding links that came from digital trust networks, not institutions. So you see what happened there? The traditional world stepped into digital soil and then the rules changed. This isn't just about technology, though. It's about how humans form trust in the age of abundance. Digital natives build trust laterally. So this is through peers, through repetition, through social proof. Traditionalists were taught to build it vertically through rank, expertise, and hierarchy. But once both groups entered the same digital ecosystem, it wasn't the young people who had to adjust, it was everyone. Now we all scroll, search, filter, and verify, or at least we think we do. Because in a world where a single video can outpace a newsroom, where a post feels truer than a televised press conference, authority is no longer earned, it's performed. And digital performance feels a lot like authenticity. That's the new currency of trust. Look at product reviews, for example. In 2024, surveys show that 82% of consumers across all age groups now check online reviews before buying something. And here's something else to think about. That includes boomers. That's millions of people who who once said, "I don't believe everything I read online." They're now saying, "Hold on, before I buy that, let me check the reviews first." It's the same in healthcare. More than half of adults over 55 now say what they do is they're saying they're researching their doctors online before booking an appointment. They're reading patient comments, watching videos, scanning star ratings. So we've gone from my doctor said it, so it must be true, to let me see what the internet says about my doctor. Let me see what the reviews, the comments are saying. Even politics isn't immune. Boomers, once loyal to newspapers and nightly news, guess what? Now they follow political commentary through podcasts, YouTube channels, and yes, TikTok explainers. And there's an irony in this. The same generation that built the old authority structure is now quietly fueling the algorithms that replaced it. So, what causes change? First, outside of the pandemic and changes that happened there, let's talk about fatigue. Traditional institutions have been losing credibility for years. From media bias scandals to corruption, people began to question whether official really means honest. Second, access. When information became free, people stopped waiting for permission to learn, they went searching for themselves. And then we have connection. Online, we can find communities that feel more personal than bureaucracy ever did. A stranger, for example, on a Reddit post might seem more relatable than a headline you would find on, say, CNN. And then we have repetition. The more often you actually hear something, the more familiar it feels. And then the brain will equate this familiarity with truth. That's not generational, that's just neurological. So when grandma sees the same wellness video shared by three of her friends, for example, to her, it no longer feels like propaganda. This is starting to feel like proof that, hey, this must actually work. This must actually be true. Here's the twist, though, that most people miss. The very people who once dismissed digital culture as fake news are now using the same digital logic to decide what's real. So they've crossed over. They're following influencers, they're sharing reels, they're forwarding bite sized fact clips. They've become part of the same ecosystem they once distrusted. The generation then that said, don't believe everything you see online is now saying, I saw it online. My friend shared it. So it must be true. And that's the quiet revolution no one talks about, because what we're really witnessing is not the sort of demise of trust, but its transformation. Authority used to live in a tower. Now it seems to live in a timeline, and everyone, regardless of age here, is scrolling to see who they can believe next. So now we're here then at the crossroads. The old guard and the new generation are standing in the same digital space, but they're not speaking the same language, though. It's like one's talking in headlines and the other is replying in hashtags. So let's call it what it is then. It's the collision of old authority and new information. And you can feel it really everywhere in your life, at dinner tables, in hospitals, in office boardrooms. If you don't believe me, let's put some perspective on it. And there really is no better place to start than within the family. So, a daughter comes home from college. She's full of conviction. She's armed with these online health tips, longevity podcasts, and biohacks she swears are science backed. She's cutting out gluten, fasting 18, 24 hours a day, or full day fast. She's taking cold showers every morning because a YouTube doctor and a TikTok influencer said it boosts dopamine and lifespan. Her mom, however, she's been a nurse for 25 years in the trenches of real medicine. She's listening quietly, just chewing her food. And then finally she says, "Honey, listen. That's not real science." And right there, silence. To the mom, this is dangerous territory. She's seen what happens when people follow online trends, misdiagnoses, supplement overdoses, panic spirals. But to the daughter, it feels condescending, a dismissal of her autonomy and the world she's learning to navigate. The dinner table has become something else entirely. Not a conversation, but a battle over who gets to define truth. And for mom, truth comes with credentials, but for the daughter, it comes with crowdsourced proof. Unfortunately, both think the other has been brainwashed. The mom's generation trust institutions because they had to. That's how you survived. You trusted the doctor, the teacher, the banker, the government, but the daughter's generation, they grew up watching institutions fail, economic collapse, corporate scandals, corruption headlines. When you see authority falter enough times, you start to build your own compass. And that's what she's doing, building belief in her own ability, really, to research, question, and then make decisions. I would argue then, because I've heard a lot of people say the younger generation, they're really arrogant. They think they know everything. But if you look at it from this perspective, I would argue it's not arrogance, it's kind of self defense. But I would also say this, they're both right, mom and daughter, but not in the way you think. Mom's experience is data. Daughter's data is experience, digital experience. And when those two collide, reason usually loses to emotion. That's not disrespect. It's just the new language of trust spoken fluently by a generation that was raised to believe that wisdom lives in the comment section. Now, let's shift scenes though to the workplace. And for this one, let's just find ourselves in an office. I think this is um, a great example. A younger employee, maybe mid 20s, very ambitious, very intelligent, very sharp, doesn't miss a thing. She's been there 3 months and already sees inefficiencies everywhere. She wants to automate workflows, create shared drives, streamline communication. Her tools are digital dashboards and collaborative platforms. But guess what? Her supervisor, early 60s, suit pressed, tie straight, he's been managing people longer than she's been alive. And he tells her, you know what? We already have a system that works and it's been working. Yeah, she nods in agreement, but you can see it on her face. She doesn't buy it. To her, the way we've always done it sounds like the way we've stopped growing. To him, let's innovate, let's streamline sounds like let's throw away everything that's works and has been working. They're not just in generational standoff mode, they're in more of a cultural one. Because what the younger employee calls efficiency, the older manager takes as disrespect. So to him, you know what? He spent decades mastering a system that rewarded hierarchy. And this younger generation grew up in a system that rewards disruption. Okay, that's how he's feeling in the moment. He earned authority by time and she earned it by contribution. And when she asks questions like, why do we do it this way? He doesn't hear curiosity or trying to understand. He's hearing more of a challenge. And I have an uncomfortable truth for you. You can't talk about generational trust without talking about ego. The younger generation often assume innovation equals intelligence. The older generation often assumes tenure equals wisdom, but both can be wrong. Sometimes the new system isn't smarter, it's just shinier. Sometimes the old way isn't outdated, it's just tested because it's easy to demand respect for innovation when you've never had to build a system from scratch. But it's also easy to dismiss new ideas when you're tired of watching old lessons get forgotten every 5 years. And sometimes new ideas are more streamlined. Then there's the subtle erosion of respect that happens when experience meets Google. I think we're probably all familiar with this. So a mechanic, he's got 30 years under his belt, grease on his hands. He's got a system, a rhythm in how he approaches things. And he's explaining why a repair has to be done in a certain way. Now, this customer happens to be maybe 25, but guess what happens? They pull up a video on their phone and they say, actually, this guy fixed it differently. The mechanic freezes, not angry, just sort of feels deflated because what that young customer doesn't see is the decades of trial, error, and quiet intuition behind that explanation that the mechanic gave him. Even if it's not disrespect, it's going to feel like it because somewhere along the line, we stop distinguishing between knowing about something and knowing how to do it. And what I'm getting at is this: information has become a substitute for experience. And when everyone can research, expertise starts to look elitist. Think about it. How many times have you looked up your symptoms on Google and gave yourself a diagnosis? In fact, now you can just type your symptoms into Chat GPT, and boom, you got a diagnosis, a prognosis, and a long list of medical and holistic treatments. But wait, there's more, because the real tension that no one talks about is that the internet made knowledge free, but it also made humility optional. So you don't need to apprentice, study, or fail anymore to have an opinion. You just need a Wi-Fi connection and confidence. Um, you don't even need confidence, actually. Like, anybody can get behind and be a keyboard warrior because there's this feeling of anonymity. But the veteran, the one who spent decades perfecting their craft, now competes not just with younger workers, but with millions of voices claiming equal expertise. So we're watching a quiet rebellion, a generation refusing to accept that mastery belongs only to those with credentials and experience, and an older generation refusing to believe that clicks and just typing up Google can replace competence, experience, and credentials. And when you put it like that, neither side is winning, because when everyone's talking, no one's really listening. And when everyone can publish, authority isn't earned anymore. It's just voted on. That's the part that I think is really bothersome. The person who knows the most may no longer be the one who gets heard the most. So the mechanic's voice, the teacher's voice, um, the journalist's voice, whatever expert in whatever field, their voice, they're not vanishing. They're just competing with the algorithm. And the algorithm doesn't care how long you've been doing it, it only cares how long someone will watch. That's the real world tension, I think. Not generations fighting, but experience arguing with exposure. And the only thing more powerful than either is what's quietly controlling them both: the algorithm. That's the real puppet master in this story, not the generations, not the opinions, the algorithm quietly deciding what each of us gets to see, feel, and ultimately believe. And what's wild is most of us don't even realize how much it already knows about us. It doesn't need to read your diary because it is your diary. Every scroll, every pause, every second you linger on something, data is being collected. Let me break this down for you. For the first time in history, we don't share a common information source. We share customized realities. You and I could both type the same search term: climate change, nutrition, unemployment, etc. And we're going to get completely different results because the algorithm doesn't care about what's true. It cares about what you keep engaged. I have tried it with several different people. Try it. Try it right now. And I promise you, you're going to get different results. If you're anxious, it'll feed you fear. If you're hopeful, it'll feed you motivation. If you're lonely, it'll feed you connection or at least the illusion of it, but it could also feed you the opposite because it's all learning about you. Every single click, the algorithm learns more. And over time, it learns how to hold your attention longer than any conversation ever could. We tend to think that young people are the ones that are glued to their screens, lost in online trends. But if you scroll through Facebook long enough, you're going to see the same thing happening in different language. And that's the big reveal here. Older generations aren't immune, they're targeted differently. Their feeds are slower, steadier, filled with nostalgia, memory lane posts, and friendly warnings that blur into misinformation. Younger generations get fast cut videos with captions like, the truth they don't want you to know. um, our elder users get posts that start with things like doctors are finally admitting or the government quietly changed. Different fonts, different speed, same formula, emotion first, evidence later, if ever. And when something feels like it confirms what we already believe, you're not going to question it. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to share it. The human brain craves confirmation more than accuracy. That's called confirmation bias. And algorithms, they know exactly how to feed that craving. Let me share a very scary statistic with you. Honestly, it still shocks me. According to MIT, false stories are 70% more likely to be shared than true ones. Why? Because falsehoods are written to move you. They make you angry, they make you scared, maybe self righteous, maybe cry. And those emotions are rocket fuel for to go viral. Okay. The algorithm isn't political or moral, it's mechanical. It amplifies what makes people feel something, not what helps them think. So when we say the truth spreads slowly, it's not poetic, it's just physics. We've officially crossed into an era where your eyes cannot be trusted. AI generated images, there are videos, cloned voices, fake news anchors. They look real, they sound real, and they spread fast. I mean, I think they even just signed an AI singer to a label. And while young people tend to spot deep fakes faster because they grew up with filters and meme culture, it takes our elders a little bit longer. They often lean on visual trust. If they can see it, they think it must be real. In fact, the experts are saying that over 1 in 3 adults over 55 couldn't distinguish a deep fake video from a real one. And that's scary. And it's not because they're not tech savvy per se, it's because their trust reflex was built in a world where seeing really was believing. Now, that reflex is being exploited along with their emotions. The algorithm isn't just shaping our beliefs, it's monetizing our emotions. Every anger or outrage click, every tearful video, every argument in the comments is worth something. Anger sells, emotion sells, and division keeps us scrolling. I know this firsthand. Let me tell you a quick story. Most of my old episodes on my podcast focused on all things positive, and the algorithm did not seem to like this, or shall I say, the people. Yes, of course, you must consider that the it could have just stunk, right? But also, people were pressing the dislike button on a lot of those videos that were just talking about being happy, having a good mindset, or there's beauty in the world episodes, which I still believe, by the way. And I still make those videos because, yes, there is still beauty, but really, it was like, wow, the system is just asking you to perform for it. And it is going to reward you for it with validation, attention, pushing your content forward in this case. and tiny bits of dopamine as you scroll along. Social media has changed so many social dynamics. I mean, think about it. We used to argue around the dinner table. Now we argue online in public while the algorithm just watches in the background and whispers, "More of that, please." There is something hidden in all of this, something I bet you will have a hard time believing, but it's true. It's an irony that no one likes to admit. That same system that is initiated parts of our younger generation into this type of space has also now been initiating parts of our elders. Different content, same mechanics. And I briefly mentioned it earlier, but your mom sharing wellness myths and your nephew sharing conspiracy clips are participating in the same behavior pattern. So just because they're sharing different things doesn't mean the behavior pattern is different. Different platforms, same psychological hook. We've become two sides of the same screen, each convinced the other is being fooled while both are being guided by the same invisible hand. Okay, that's the real generational convergence. Not in beliefs, but in vulnerability. And the algorithm has a favorite game. It's called familiarity. Perhaps you've heard of the illusory truth effect. So it's the brain's habit of mistaking repetition for truth. That's why a lot of times different brand symbols, people put their brand every single place you could possibly imagine because they're looking for this familiarity effect or this illusory truth effect to happen. Because if you see or hear something often enough, even if it's false, we'll use hear something often enough, even if it's false. Well, honestly, I guess I can use visual as well. Anyway, your brain starts to accept it as fact. That's not a generational flaw. That's human wiring. And algorithms have turned it into a business model. They don't have to change your mind overnight. They just have to repeat the same emotional beats until your guard drops. Fear, comfort, outrage, belonging, repeat. Eventually, it doesn't even matter who said it first. It just feels familiar. So it must be true. It feels true. And remember what I said about the older generation being initiated into the system? Well, the older generations, the ones who used to mock kids believing everything they see online, are now doing the same thing. So they've crossed over from gatekeepers of truth to participants in digital mythology. And no, no, it's not every single elder, nor is it every younger generation when I'm talking about these things. But we are seeing an increasing trend in changed online behavior within the older population. It's not because they're naive, by the way. It's just, being part of this culture. And the algorithm knows that humans, better than humans, probably know themselves. Because while we were learning how to use technology, technology was learning how to use us. So here we are, different generations standing in the same digital storm, holding different compasses, and both wondering why the other seems lost. And for a long time, that's where the story stopped, the us versus them narrative. But something is shifting. Maybe it's exhaustion, maybe it's the realization that neither side can win this new information war alone. We live in a time when everyone's speaking louder but hearing less, and the algorithm loves it. It's rewarding, it rewards certainty, not curiosity. And yet there is another irony here, yet another one. The same digital tools that divide us are now quietly helping us reconnect if we use them intentionally. What I mean is that you see now doctors who once criticized Dr. TikTok, for example, are now filming educational clips reaching patients who never would have walked into a clinic. Teachers are turning classrooms into digital communities where learning can go both ways, from student to teacher, teacher to student. Even families are creating group chats, sharing recipes and news and memes. They have their own private little um, channels sometimes, but they're filled with affection instead of outrage. So there's not a lot of that going on inside those circles. Technology isn't inherently the villain, then, in these cases. It seems to look like a mirror and it's reflecting whoever's holding it, especially if you're building these online family chats or channels, or the doctor who is attached to a clinic and he's helping patients actually walk through the door and get help, and teachers who are sharing information. So that should be served, though, with a side of extreme caution. Some of these things you find in the influencer world, though, are outright dangerous, and it can lead people down the wrong path. So be careful of what Dr. TikTok you're listening to. Be careful of what educator you're listening to. And some things are okay, but really, is that what I'm really talking about here? And does it make everything okay, what I just said? Probably not. It does bridge some gap between generations when it comes to expert trust, or in this case, influencer and expert trust. And bridging the gap doesn't mean, though, pretending everything's fine. There's still arrogance on both sides. And that's what keeps the walls up, unfortunately, because older generations sometimes roll their eyes at internet wisdom, forgetting that collective learning is how their generation made progress too, even if the older generation is spending more time online. Again, remember, the algorithm is serving up what is unique to you. Younger people dismiss traditional systems as outdated, forgetting that those same systems built the roads, the hospitals, and the freedoms that they, are talking about or posting about. The problem the problem isn't that we're seeing the world differently if I present it this way then. It's that we've forgotten that different perspectives were always the point. Maybe I think that's what we're all missing. Maybe the original algorithm here, not the one that curates your feed, but the other one. You listen to me, I listen to you. That's how civilization worked long before Wi-Fi, and we can still do it, and yet still move forward in technology. And every honest conversation we have, then every moment of curiosity, and every time we pause, then before hitting share, that's just a reset signal to the old school algorithm, if you will. It's telling the new school algorithm, the system, I'm not here to argue, I'm just here to understand. Also, I also understand that we just are not going to like everybody or trust everybody, and that's just life. So I do understand that. Here is what I see here. The data is saying, hey, our elders are adapting. They're using apps, they're searching reviews, they're learning to navigate digital life with the same curiosity that once defined only the young. And perhaps there is a silver lining in there somewhere. Maybe the real story then would not be about generations after all. Perhaps it's just about older people learning new things, younger people rediscovering old wisdom, and both realizing that trust has never been static. It's always been a living thing, just reshaped by different eras generations as it passes through. So the printing press did it, television did it, now the algorithm is doing it. But this time, I would like to think that we're all going to be awake while it happens and we can choose how to evolve. I said I would like to think. We all know that there are some serious issues with how we consume information, though, and who we trust, the expert or the influencers. So you have to be very, very careful because there are some dangerous people. Well, I'll say people, but there's some dangerous information out there. And so you really need to do your research and be as mindful with that as possible. So, as we stand in this really strange connected world, half virtual, half tangible, maybe the real challenge isn't figuring out who's right. I think we've kind of figured that out by now. Maybe it's learning how to stay connected and avoid anything profiting from our division. If there's one thing this episode reminds me of, it's that trust was never about generations, it's about connection. And the world feels really noisy right now. But the moment we stop trying to win the argument and start trying to understand the person behind it, that's where trust can begin. Thank you for spending your time with me today. If you found this episode meaningful, subscribe, share it, and keep the conversation going because the future of trust is something we're building one honest conversation at a time. Until next episode, take care of your mind, body, and soul.